Hi, and welcome to the Senior Network. I'm your host, Greg Fulton, along with Debbie Lyons, my co-host.
How are you?
I am wonderful, thank you. Today we are joined by Jay Mullinax and Jenny Brazelton. Good to have you. Thank you so much for joining us. And Happy New Year to everyone.
Thank you. Happy New Year to you.
It's great, isn't it?
Awesome.
2017, we're happy about that. It's been a crazy year,
We
hasn't
made it through the holidays.
We really did. All right, I got a question for you already.
Okay.
All right, because
You
it's
see
a
the
new...
big smile.
I do. He's like, oh yeah. Well, no. Ever since that you've come on the show and we've been doing the show, I sort of make these mental notes of things I have to ask, and I go home and I talk to my husband about what do we have living will?
Right.
Do we have this? What about this? What about this? Okay, it's a new year. It's a blank slate. Checklist. What do we need to know?
That's a great question, and I happen to have a list right here.
Oh gosh, imagine that.
It's a new year, and what I usually suggest to people is at the beginning of each year, think about what changes have happened last year,
Okay.
which require a change in your estate planning. So I do have a list, and I won't go through each one right this second, but financial circumstances, for
Okay.
example. Someone may have gotten an inheritance, for example, or they may have had to give money to a family member. Something
Okay.
may have changed with regard to that, or their portfolio may have changed dramatically. The stock market goes down, the stock market goes up, or they've changed assets. Those are some things.
Let me ask you a question. What about the hurricane? Would that have affected our financial situation?
Absolutely. There's a lot of people that are out of their houses, for example. So
Okay.
that's a change of assets. You could have sold a house, or a house could have been destroyed and you moved. Well, if you left the house to a family member in your will or in your trust, under South Carolina law, they're no longer going to get anything because there's no replacement law in South Carolina for what you left for someone. So if you left a specific asset to someone, such as a house, and you no longer own that house, they're not going to get the new house that you bought in replacement. So
Okay.
you need to go back and check what assets have changed and how does that influence my estate plan, because I want to make sure that I leave things to who I want to.
No, Jay, on that.
Yeah.
Replacement law. What?
Well, I'm using that term loosely. There's no such word as replacement law in South Carolina, but what I mean is, under some state laws, if you left a particular item to a person and you no longer own that particular item at your death, then they would get something of equal value, something similar. But under South Carolina law, if you don't own that asset that you left to a particular person, they're not going to get something in place of it.
All right,
They
we
just
need-
won't get anything.
Give me that in like real language. Like
Sure.
if it is an antique.
An example being, well, sure, we could use an antique if you like. Let's say that you have an antique china hutch or something
Okay.
that's worth $20,000, for example, and you leave it to a particular child. Let's
Okay.
say the name is Debbie. You leave it to your child, Debbie, and you decide you want to sell that, or it got ruined in the hurricane.
I got it.
And you no longer own it.
Got it. Got
Well,
it.
Debbie
got it,
is
got
not
it.
going to get the
What
new
what doesn't
china hutch
exist.
that you
Okay.
purchased, because there's no replacement value given to her
Okay.
under that circumstance. The same with a house or a car or anything that you give that's specific like that.
So laws really differ state to state to state.
They do.
So for all the people who are down here that maybe have come from a different state, it might be. Oh, look at you.
There's something else on my checklist I wanted to tell you
Okay.
about. Because people move.
Right.
And if they move to this state, it is important that they look to an estate planning attorney to change their estate plans according to South Carolina law.
Okay.
What I tell people is a plan may be valid in South Carolina, but it may not turn out the same way that they intended in the state they came from.
Okay.
So validity does not mean it's going to turn out the same way that you intended it from wherever you came from. And if you're residents of South Carolina and you plan to be here for the foreseeable future, it's time to look at that. And the same would go to anybody leaving the state, going to another state. They need to check there too as well. So
Oh, this is good. This is fun.
yeah. So residency, beneficiary designations, maybe someone passed away that you had left in a life insurance policy to, or an IRA or something like that. If they passed away this past year, or maybe they've become disabled, maybe there's a reason not to leave it to them the same that you intended last year. It's time to look at beneficiary designations for those types of things. Tax laws are changing, and here's one that's really important for South Carolinians, and everybody needs to know about it. January 1st of 2017,
Okay.
the laws will significantly change with regard to powers of attorney in South Carolina.
For example.
Well, the laundry
Did you
list
know
is
that,
too
Jen?
I did
the,
not.
the laundry list is too long
Okay.
to mention, but South Carolina has adopted what's called the Uniform Powers of Attorney Act, and it's effective January 1st. We did not adopt the forms under that act. It's a federal type of system where the laws are uniform throughout the states, but South Carolina has adopted some of that, but not all of it.
Okay.
But that significantly changes our laws in South Carolina. So if you have a power of attorney in South Carolina, you might want to ask your attorney, is there anything we need to change with regard to that?
Kind of skipping to hospice for a second with the power of attorney. Power of attorney, living will, does that ever come into effect with people who are going into hospice or have an opportunity?
Absolutely. We want to make sure that they have those documents in place. Durable power of attorney, healthcare power of attorney, because often our patients are getting to that point where they can no longer make those decisions for themselves. So we need that spokesperson in place for them.
And these three are the experts in this, but how do you decide who gets your power of attorney? I mean, are there criteria? I mean,
it's usually choice. It's usually the spouse or the eldest child, but it could be a friend, a neighbor, a cousin. The oldest child could live out of town and that's not appropriate, or there's issues with family. So it's usually a choice. Some families pick a dual, pick two children type of thing. So.
I usually say there's two things you should consider in choosing an agent. Obviously, you're going to pick someone that you trust, but that's the first choice. The second one is pick someone that will do what you want them to do, in terms of health care, for example.
Got it.
They have to follow through with your wishes, and someone that has the capacity to do it. If someone is working 80 hours a week at their job, they're probably not going to have time to do the duties they need to as an agent. So that's something to get. They may be the best person for the job if they didn't have a full-time job, but that may not be the appropriate person. What's
really interesting about having these discussions is we always start out like with a topic and end up really kind of diverting what we're talking about, but it's really important, I think, for any of us at any age. That's the one thing you guys have really taught us. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back. There's a lot more to come.